Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the cold metal window of her laboratory on Titan. The stars looked different here, so far from Earth. Each point of light represented a world that humanity could never truly reach. Not because the technology didn't exist, but because the law forbade it. The Galactic Council had made the rules clear 50 years ago when they first contacted Earth. No ship could travel faster than twice the speed of light. The veil barriers made sure of that. These strange energy walls surrounded every star system like invisible cages. Any ship that tried to go faster would simply explode. Sarah had spent her entire career studying these barriers. The Council said they were natural, like gravity or magnetism. They claimed the barriers protected younger species from the dangers of deep space, but Sarah had always wondered why protection looked so much like a prison. Still staring at the walls of our cage, Commander Marcus Torres walked into the lab, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He was a tall man with dark hair and eyes that never stopped questioning everything around him. Sarah took the coffee and smiled. The council inspector arrives tomorrow. We should probably hide the real research. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. Let me guess. Inspector Zethkalar wants to see our approved experiments again. The ones that go nowhere and discover nothing. For months, Sarah and her team had been working on something the council would never approve. They had found something impossible in the data. The veil barriers weren't natural at all. They were machines. Massive, ancient machines hidden in deep space. Sarah walked to her computer and pulled up the secret files. Look at this again, Marcus. The energy signatures from the barriers. They're too perfect, too organized. Nature doesn't work like this. Marcus studied the screen. The patterns showed clear signs of artificial construction. Energy flows that followed mathematical rules. Power sources that seemed to come from specific points in space. How long have you been working on this? He asked. 2 years. But I think I know where the power comes from now. Sarah pulled up a star map. Red dots marked the locations of barrier generators throughout the galaxy. See these patterns? The generators are always near dead zones in space, places where stars used to be. Marcus felt his heart racing. You think they're using collapsed stars as power sources? More than that. I think whoever built these things is still out there, still controlling them. The council isn't in charge of the galaxy. Someone else is, and they're using the council to keep us all trapped. The lab fell silent except for the hum of computers. Both scientists understood what this meant. If the barriers were artificial, they could be turned off. Or bypassed. Sarah, if you're right about the... Marcus started. I am right. I've been tracking the energy flows for months. But there's more. She pulled up another file. I know how to get around them. The screen showed complex equations and diagrams. Sarah had discovered that the barriers worked by detecting ships that moved too fast through normal space. But what if a ship didn't move through space at all? What if it folded space instead? Space-time folding, Marcus whispered. You want to bend the universe, not bend it, just make it smaller. For a moment. If we can collapse the distance between 2 points, we never actually travel fast. We just step from one place to another. Marcus stared at the equations. As a military commander, he understood the implications better than most. If humans could bypass the speed limits, they could explore the galaxy freely. They could find the truth about who was really in control. The council will never allow this, he said. Then we don't tell them. Over the next few hours, Sarah explained her plan. They would need a small ship and a crew willing to risk everything. They would have to work in complete secrecy. If the council discovered what they were doing, humanity would face punishment beyond imagination. But if they succeeded, they might free not just humanity but every species trapped by the barriers. Marcus made his decision. How many people do you need? 20. Scientists and engineers who can keep their mouths shut. I can get them. Military people who ask the right questions. Marcus looked at the star map again. Where do we test this? Sarah pointed to a region of space beyond Pluto. There. Far enough from Earth that if something goes wrong, we won't take anyone else with us. They spent the rest of the night planning. By morning, they had the basics of humanity's most dangerous experiment. They would build a fold space drive in secret. They would test it away from prying eyes, and if it worked, they would use it to find the truth about the galaxy. The next day, Inspector Zethkalar arrived on schedule. He was a tall, thin alien with blue skin and 6 arms. His species had been part of the Council for over 1,000 years. To him, humans were still children who needed constant watching. Dr. Chen, Zeth Kalar said in perfect English, "I trust your research continues to follow approved guidelines." Sarah smiled and showed him the fake experiments. Projects that studied the barriers from the outside, never questioning their nature or origin. Research that would never threaten the established order. Very good, the inspector said after reviewing the false data. Humanity shows proper respect for galactic law. Continue your work within approved limits. After Zeth Kalar left, Sarah and Marcus began recruiting their secret team. They chose carefully. Each person had to be someone who questioned authority, someone who would risk everything for the chance at truth. Dr. James Wright, a physicist who had always wondered why certain areas of space seemed forbidden. Lieutenant Maria Santos, a pilot who had pushed her ship to the very edge of the speed limit just to see what would happen. Engineer David Kim, who had spent years studying council technology and finding it strangely limited. One by one, they joined the project. Each person understood that they were committing treason against not just the Galactic Council, but against the established order of the universe itself. The work took months. They built their fold space drive in pieces, spreading the construction across multiple hidden facilities. The device was small but incredibly complex. It would bend space-time just enough to step from one point to another, without ever actually moving fast. As they worked, Sarah made more discoveries. The barriers weren't just limiting speed. They were slowly getting smaller. Every few hundred years, the energy walls moved closer to each star system. Species were being compressed into smaller and smaller areas. "It's not protection," she told Marcus one night as they worked alone in the lab. "It's a trap. Someone is slowly crushing the entire galaxy." Marcus looked at the data and felt cold fear in his stomach. "How long do we have?" "At current rates, maybe 2,000 years before the barriers compress so much that most worlds become uninhabitable. Unless we stop it. Unless we find who's doing it and make them stop." 3 months later, their ship was ready. The breakthrough looked like a normal human vessel from the outside. Inside, it carried technology that would either free the galaxy or get them all killed. The team gathered on Titan for their final meeting. 20 humans who were about to break the most fundamental law in the galaxy. "Once we do this, there's no going back," Marcus told them. "The Council will hunt us. Our own government might disown us. But if we succeed, we might save every species in the galaxy." Sarah looked around the room at the faces of her teammates. She saw fear, excitement, and determination. These were the people who would either free the galaxy or die trying. "Let's go find out what's really out there," she said. The breakthrough launched that night, disappearing into the darkness between the stars. Behind them, they left no trace of their work. The laboratories were empty. The computers were wiped clean. When Inspector Zeth Kalar returned the following week for an unscheduled inspection, he found nothing but empty rooms and missing humans. For the first time in 1,000 years, he felt afraid. 3 months passed without any sign of the missing humans. The Galactic Council searched every known human facility. They questioned Earth's government officials. They scanned empty space with their most advanced sensors. But the breakthrough and her crew had vanished completely. Inspector Zeth Kalar filed his reports with growing unease. In his 1,000 years of service, he had never seen an entire research team disappear so completely. The humans had left no trace, no clues, no hint of where they had gone. Then the impossible happened. It started with a single ship appearing in the Centauri system. Council sensors detected it moving at incredible speed. Not just fast, but impossibly fast. The reading showed velocities that should have triggered the veil barriers immediately. Yet the ship continued to fly, unharmed and untouchable. Within hours, more reports arrived. Human ships were appearing throughout Council space. They moved at speeds that made the fastest Council vessels look like they were standing still. Some readings showed them traveling at 20 times the speed of light. Others showed even higher speeds. The humans weren't just breaking the law. They were shattering it. Admiral Cathamore of the Council fleet watched his tactical display with growing horror. Red dots marked human ships throughout the galaxy. They appeared and disappeared without warning. They ignored the veil barriers as if the energy walls didn't exist. "How is this possible?" he demanded from his bridge crew. "Unknown, sir," his sensor officer replied. "The energy signatures don't match any known propulsion system. They're not even trying to go through the barriers. They're just elsewhere and then here. On the planet Nexus Prime, the Council's capital world, emergency meetings were called. Representatives from 847 species gathered in the Great Chamber. Fear filled the room like smoke. Supreme Hierarch Veltar, leader of the Council for the past 3 centuries, stood before the assembly, his ancient voice carried across the chamber. "The humans have violated the fundamental laws that keep our galaxy safe," he announced. "They must be stopped before their recklessness destroys us all." But even as he spoke, Veltar felt doubt creeping into his mind. The barriers had always been absolute. No species had ever found a way around them. If the humans had succeeded, what did that mean for everything the Council believed? The answer came sooner than anyone expected. Admiral Marcus Torres materialized above Nexus Prime in a ship that shouldn't exist. The human vessel hung in space directly above the Council building, broadcasting on every frequency in the galaxy. "People of the galaxy," Torres' voice rang out across 1,000 worlds. "We are the humans you've been looking for. We have something to tell you." Council security forces scrambled to respond, but their ships moved like slugs compared to the human vessel. Every time they tried to target the ship, it simply wasn't there anymore. "For millions of years, you've been told that the veil barriers protect you," Torres continued. "You've been told that the speed limits keep you safe from the dangers of deep space. We're here to tell you that you've been lied to." On Nexus Prime, Veltar watched in horror as Torres' ship projected images into the sky above the capital, star maps showing the true size of the galaxy, sensor readings from beyond the barriers, and most shocking of all, evidence that the barriers were artificial. "The walls around your star systems aren't natural," Torres explained. "They're machines. Ancient machines built by someone else. Someone who wants to keep you trapped." Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched and listened. Species that had never questioned the barriers began to wonder. Civilizations that had accepted their limitations for millennia started to doubt. But Torres wasn't finished. "We've found the power sources," he announced. "Hidden stations in deep space drawing energy from collapsed stars. The barriers are getting smaller. Every few hundred years, your worlds get a little more crowded. Your resources get a little more scarce. You're being slowly compressed." The implications hit the Council like a physical blow. If the barriers were shrinking, then the conflicts over resources, the territorial disputes, the endless competitions between species, all of it was by design. "We don't know who built these machines," Torres continued, "but we're going to find them, and we're going to turn them off." Veltar activated the Council's emergency broadcast system. "Human commander, you don't understand what you're doing. The barriers protect us from ancient dangers. Without them, we would all be destroyed." Torres' response was immediate and devastating. "Protected? From what? We've traveled beyond the barriers. We've seen what's out there. Empty space, distant galaxies, and wonders you can't imagine. The only danger we've found is the truth about your prison." The human ship began moving again, demonstrating its impossible speed. It traveled from one end of the Nexus system to the other in seconds. Then it jumped to the next system, and the next, always staying ahead of Council forces. Dr. Sarah Chen's voice joined the broadcast from their ship. "We've discovered how to fold space-time," she explained in simple terms that any species could understand. "We don't break the speed limit. We just make the distance shorter. The barriers can't stop us because we never actually go fast." Scientific minds throughout the galaxy raced to understand the implications. If space could be folded, if distance could be collapsed, then the barriers were meaningless. The prison walls could be bypassed by anyone with the knowledge. "We're sharing this technology," Torres announced. "Not selling it, not trading it. Giving it away to any species that wants to explore beyond their cages." The Council's response was swift and desperate. They declared humanity a threat to galactic stability. They ordered all member species to capture human ships on sight. They activated their most powerful weapons and prepared for war. But the humans were already spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. Human exploration teams appeared in systems that had been isolated for eons. They found species that had been cut off from the rest of the galaxy so long that they had forgotten other civilizations existed. They discovered ancient ruins that predated even the oldest Council records. Each discovery was broadcast to the entire galaxy. Images of vast alien cities, records of civilizations that had thrived before the barriers existed. Evidence of a galaxy that had once been free. On Earth, the human government struggled to understand what was happening. They had known nothing about the secret project. Now their species was at war with the most powerful organization in the galaxy. President Martinez addressed the United Nations in emergency session. "We cannot control what our people have done," she said, "but we cannot abandon them either. If they're right about the barriers, then they're fighting for the freedom of every species in the galaxy." The decision was made. Earth would support the rebels, even if it meant facing the wrath of the Galactic Council. Meanwhile, Torres and his team pushed deeper into forbidden space. They followed the energy signatures of the barrier generators, mapping a network of control stations that stretched across the galaxy, and in the deepest reaches of space, beyond the outermost barriers, they found something that changed everything. A massive structure orbited a dead star. It was bigger than any space station ever built, a construct that dwarfed entire planets. Energy flowed from it to barrier generators throughout the galaxy. But most shocking of all were the life signs coming from inside the structure. Someone was still alive in there. Someone was still controlling the barriers. "We found them," Sarah whispered as their sensors analyzed the massive construct. "We found who's been keeping us trapped." Torres stared at the readings and felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. Whatever lived in that structure had been controlling the galaxy for millions of years. They had built the barriers. They had convinced the Council to enforce the speed limits. They had slowly compressed civilization after civilization, and now they knew that humanity had found them. Deep inside the construct, ancient minds that had slumbered for millennia began to wake. They had felt the barriers being bypassed. They had watched the humans spread across their carefully controlled galaxy. For the first time in eons, the architects felt something they had almost forgotten. Fear. The young species had broken free of their cage. Worse, they were teaching others to do the same. The carefully maintained prison was falling apart. It was time to end this rebellion before it spread any further. The barriers throughout the galaxy began to pulse with new energy. They started moving inward, compressing faster than ever before. If the architects couldn't contain the humans, they would crush the entire galaxy and start over. The massive construct hung in space like a dark moon around a collapsed star. Sarah Chen stared at it through the view screen of the breakthrough and felt her breath catch. After months of following energy signatures and tracing power flows, they had finally found the source. "It's bigger than anything we've ever seen," whispered David Kim from the engineering station. "The energy output alone could power our entire solar system." Marcus Torres studied the tactical readings with growing unease. "Life signs? Thousands of them," Sarah replied. "Maybe more. The structure is so massive our sensors can't penetrate very deep." They had been watching the construct for 3 days now, trying to understand what they were seeing. It was clearly artificial, but the technology was beyond anything in Council records. The metal looked ancient but showed no signs of decay. Energy flowed through it in patterns that defied known physics. "Commander," Lieutenant Santos called from the communications station, "we're receiving a signal." The view screen flickered and changed. A figure appeared, tall, elegant, with features that seemed almost familiar yet utterly alien. Its skin had a silver sheen, and its eyes held depths that spoke of incredible age. "Young humans," the figure spoke in perfect English, though its lips barely moved. "You have traveled far to find us. We are impressed by your persistence." Torres stepped forward. "Who are you? Are you the ones controlling the barriers?" The figure smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We are the architects. We built your galaxy's current structure millions of years ago. The barriers, as you call them, are our gift to the younger species." "Gift?" Sarah's voice was sharp with anger. "You've trapped entire civilizations behind energy walls. You've compressed their living space for millennia. We have protected them," the architect replied calmly. "Before we imposed order, your galaxy was chaos. Species spread too fast, consumed too much, destroyed themselves and others. We brought stability." The view screen changed, showing images from the distant past. Galactic wars that consumed entire star systems. Species that expanded so rapidly they exhausted their resources and collapsed. Civilizations that met other civilizations and immediately began fighting. "See what freedom brought," the architect continued. "Death, destruction, waste. We ended that chaos. We gave each species exactly what they needed to survive. No more, no less." Marcus felt anger building in his chest. "By keeping them in cages. by keeping them safe. Your species is young. You do not understand the wisdom of limits. Sarah stepped forward, her scientific mind racing. The barriers are shrinking. You're slowly crushing the galaxy. That's not protection. That's extermination. For the first time, the architect showed emotion. A flicker of something passed across its ancient features. The compression is necessary. As younger species become more numerous, resources become scarce. We must maintain balance. Balance? Torres laughed harshly. You mean control. How many civilizations have you compressed out of existence? The architect didn't answer directly. Instead, the view screen showed more images. Star systems where the barriers had closed completely. Worlds that had been abandoned as the energy walls made them uninhabitable. Species that had simply vanished from galactic records. The cycle has repeated many times, the architect said finally. Expand, consume, compress, renew. It is the only way to maintain order across deep time. Sarah felt sick. You've been doing this for millions of years. How many galaxies? How many species? As many as necessary. The truth hit them all at once. The architects weren't just controlling their galaxy. They had done this before to other galaxies, other civilizations. They were cosmic farmers, growing civilizations like crops and harvesting them when they grew too large. The council doesn't know, do they? Marcus asked. They think they're governing, but they're just managing livestock for you. The council serves its purpose. They maintain order within the parameters we set. They believe they are protecting their member species, and in a way they are. From the truth, Torres felt his hands clench into fists. What truth? The architect's smile grew wider. That freedom always leads to destruction. That choice always leads to chaos. That the only way for civilizations to survive is under careful control. The view screen changed again, showing the current state of the galaxy. Hundreds of worlds where the barriers were closing in, species fighting over dwindling resources, the council struggling to maintain peace as living space grew scarce. Your rebellion has accelerated our timeline, the architect continued. By breaking free of the barriers, you have shown other species that escape is possible. Soon they will all try to follow your example. Chaos will return. Sarah's scientific mind was working furiously. So you're speeding up the compression. You're going to crush the entire galaxy rather than let it go free. We are maintaining order. If freedom cannot be prevented, then freedom must be eliminated. The magnitude of what they faced settled on the human crew like a crushing weight. They weren't just fighting for their own species' freedom. They were racing against the death of billions of civilizations. There has to be another way, Sarah said desperately. The galaxy is vast. There's room for everyone to expand without conflict. The architect's expression became almost pitying. We have observed 10,000 civilizations across multiple galaxies. They all believe as you do. They are always wrong. But you've never given them the chance to prove otherwise, Marcus shot back. You control them from the beginning. Of course they fight. You force them to compete for limited resources. Resources are always limited. Energy, matter, space, even the universe itself is finite. Without management, species consume everything and destroy themselves. Sarah had an idea forming in her mind, a crazy, impossible idea that might just work. What about you? How many resources do you consume maintaining these barriers? The architect paused, perhaps surprised by the question. The barriers require significant energy to maintain, but the cost is justified by the order they provide. How much energy? Sarah pressed. Enough to power entire star systems? Enough to let those trapped civilizations expand into empty space instead of fighting over scraps? The pause was longer this time. Sarah could see she had hit something important. The energy requirements are substantial, the architect admitted. Marcus understood where Sarah was going. You're the ones consuming the most resources. You're the ones who need controlling. The architect's calm facade cracked slightly. We are the guardians of order. Our consumption serves a higher purpose, and does it? Sarah challenged. Or are you just another species that expanded too fast and consumed too much? Did you build the barriers to control others or to feed yourselves? The truth hung in the space between them. The architects had become the very thing they claimed to prevent. They had grown so large, so power-hungry, that they needed to harvest entire galaxies just to survive. Your species is more perceptive than most, the architect said finally. Yes, we require significant resources, but we use them to maintain cosmic order. Without us, chaos would return. Without you, civilizations could actually grow and explore freely. Torres countered. They could find their own solutions to resource problems. They could cooperate instead of being forced to compete. The architect's image flickered with what might have been anger. Cooperation? You speak of cooperation while leading a rebellion that threatens the stability of the galaxy? We're cooperating with every species that wants to be free, Sarah replied. We're sharing our technology instead of hoarding it. We're proving that your way isn't the only way. For a moment, silence filled the space between the two ships. The architect seemed to be considering something, running calculations that spanned eons of experience. Finally, it spoke again. Your words are interesting, young human, but words are not proof. We have seen civilizations promise cooperation and deliver only destruction. Then let us prove you wrong, Marcus said. Turn off the barriers. Let the galaxy go free. If chaos returns, if species destroy themselves, then you can turn them back on. The architect's laugh was like the sound of stars dying. And if we are wrong? If our civilization collapses without the energy from the barriers? The risk is too great. Sarah felt pieces clicking together in her mind. You're dying, aren't you? Your species has been harvesting energy for so long that you've forgotten how to produce it yourselves. You need the barriers not just for control, but for survival. The architect's image flickered and stabilized. For the first time, it looked truly alien, ancient, desperate, and afraid. 10 million years we have maintained order, it said quietly. 10 million years of preventing the chaos that destroyed our own galaxy. We will not allow it to happen again. The connection ended abruptly. The view screen went dark. On the bridge of the breakthrough, the humans sat in stunned silence. They had found their enemy and discovered that it was dying. The architects weren't evil conquerors. They were terrified survivors who had built a prison to hide from their own failure. But knowing the truth didn't make them any less dangerous. Throughout the galaxy, the barriers began to pulse with new energy. The compression was accelerating. The architects had decided that if they couldn't maintain control, they would end everything and start over. The war began without warning. Across the galaxy, the veil barriers suddenly blazed with new power. Energy walls that had been slowly closing for centuries now contracted at visible speeds. Entire star systems found their livable space cut in half overnight. On Nexus Prime, Supreme Hierarch Veltar watched the readings with growing horror. The barriers around the Council's capital world were moving inward like closing fists. At current rates, they would crush the planet within months. What have the humans done? He whispered. The answer came from deep space, where the architect construct had awakened to full power. The ancient structure began launching vessels unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships that bent reality around them, that could stretch space and compress time. But humanity wasn't waiting to be destroyed. Marcus Torres stood on the bridge of the breakthrough, coordinating a battle unlike any in galactic history. Around him, displays showed human ships appearing and disappearing across dozens of star systems. Each ship carried full space generators and the determination to free an entire galaxy. Status report, he called out. Evacuation Fleet Alpha has reached the Vagan system, Lieutenant Santos reported. They're pulling civilians out before the barriers close completely. Fleet Beta is attacking barrier generators in the Centauri region, added David Kim. They've disabled 3 so far, but the architects are sending those reality warper ships to stop them. Sarah Chen worked frantically at her station, analyzing data from across the galaxy. Marcus, the barriers aren't just closing randomly. There's a pattern. They're herding populations toward specific systems. Torres studied the tactical display. Sarah was right. The compression wasn't just meant to destroy. It was designed to concentrate all galactic civilization into a small area. A easier-to-control area. They're trying to rebuild their prison, he realized. Make it smaller, more manageable. The first direct confrontation came at the barrier generator in the Sol system. An architect ship materialized near Earth, its hull shimmering with energies that hurt to look at. The human defense fleet moved to intercept, but they might as well have been throwing rocks at a hurricane. The architect vessel didn't fire weapons in any conventional sense. Instead, it simply changed things. Space around human ships became thicker, like flying through honey. Time moved differently in various parts of the battle zone, causing some ships to age years in seconds while others moved so slowly they seemed frozen. But humanity had advantages the architects hadn't expected. This is Admiral Chen. Sarah's voice broadcast to all human ships. Remember, they're not gods. They're just old and scared. Their technology works by changing the rules of physics in local areas. But fold space doesn't follow those rules. Human ships began using their fold space drives in new ways. Instead of traveling long distances, they made tiny jumps that bypassed the architect's reality distortions. A ship caught in slowed time would simply fold space to step outside the affected area. The battle raged for hours. The architect's ship destroyed dozens of human vessels, but it couldn't destroy them all. Every time it focused on one area, human ships would appear somewhere else, attacking from impossible angles. Finally, the ancient vessel made a mistake. It concentrated too much power on stopping a group of human fighters, leaving itself vulnerable for just a moment. The breakthrough folded space and appeared inside the architect ship's reality field. At point-blank range, Marcus Torres ordered every weapon fired. The ancient vessel shuddered and began to retreat. For the first time in millions of years, the architects had been forced to withdraw from a battle. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Earth's barrier was still operational, and it was closing fast. The planet had perhaps weeks before the energy wall made the world uninhabitable. Similar battles erupted across the galaxy. The architects deployed more ships, each one capable of reshaping reality on a local scale. But humanity had something their enemies lacked: numbers and desperate creativity. Human tactics evolved rapidly. They used fold space drives to appear inside barrier generators, overloading the ancient machines from within. They coordinated attacks across multiple systems simultaneously, forcing the architects to divide their attention. Most importantly, they shared their technology, with every species willing to fight. The war's turning point came when the Zephyrian Empire joined the rebellion. The Zephyrians had been part of the Galactic Council for over 2,000 years. Their species was known for careful thought and conservative politics. They had always followed the rules, always respected the barriers. But when their homeworld's barrier began crushing their greatest cities, they made a choice that shocked the galaxy. Admiral Kethmore, the Council's most decorated military commander, broadcast a message to all Council forces. I have served the law for my entire career. But there is a law higher than the Council's rules: the right of civilizations to exist. The Zephyrian fleet abandoned their Council posts and joined the human rebellion. Other species followed. The careful order that had defined galactic civilization for millennia began to crumble as species after species chose freedom over safety. The architect's response was swift and terrible. They activated weapons that had been sleeping for eons, reality storms that could erase entire star systems from existence, gravity wells that crushed planets into black holes, temporal bombs that aged worlds to death in minutes. But for every system they destroyed, 10 more joined the rebellion. Sarah Chen made the crucial breakthrough while studying captured architect technology. The ancient machines weren't just powerful, they were desperate. Every reality-warping attack, every impossible weapon, drew energy from their dying civilization. They're burning themselves out, she reported to Torres. Each time they use their big weapons, they get weaker. They're throwing everything they have at us because they know they can't sustain this war. Torres understood immediately. The architects weren't invincible gods. They were the last members of a dying species, using up their final reserves to maintain control of a galaxy they could no longer actually govern. How long can they keep this up? He asked. Sarah ran the calculations. At current expenditure rates? Maybe a year. But Marcus, her voice grew worried. If they realize they're losing, they might try to take the entire galaxy with them. The fear proved justified. Deep in their construct, the surviving architects held a council of war. They were few now. Perhaps 100 individuals where once there had been millions. Their great civilization had dwindled to almost nothing over the eons, sustained only by the energy they harvested from controlled galaxies. The young species have proven more resourceful than predicted, the lead architect admitted. Our energy reserves are at critical levels. Then we implement the final protocol, another replied. Better an empty galaxy than a chaotic one. The final protocol hadn't been used in over 1 million years. It would consume the last of their energy, but it would collapse every barrier in the galaxy simultaneously. The resulting implosion would create a massive black hole that would consume every star, every world, every trace of civilization. Then, in the empty darkness that remained, the architects would sleep until new galaxies formed. They would start over, building new prisons for new civilizations. But as they prepared to activate the protocol, something unexpected happened. A small human ship appeared inside their construct. Not outside, where their defenses were strongest. Inside, where no ship should have been able to survive. Sarah Chen and Marcus Torres stepped out of their ship onto the deck of the ancient structure. They wore simple spacesuits and carried no weapons. They had come not to fight, but to talk. "We know about the final protocol," Sarah said simply. "We know you're planning to destroy the galaxy rather than lose control of it." The lead architect materialized before them, its ancient form flickering with contained energy. "You cannot stop us, humans. Even now, the protocol is charging." "We're not here to stop you," Torres replied. "We're here to offer you something better." The architect paused, perhaps curious despite itself. Sarah stepped forward. "You've been harvesting energy for so long you've forgotten how to create it. But we know how. Our fold space technology doesn't just bend distance. It taps into the fundamental forces of space-time itself. Clean, unlimited energy. We're offering to share it with you," Torres added. "No strings attached. No conditions. Free energy for your dying civilization." The architect's form shimmered with what might have been surprise. "In exchange for what?" "Nothing," Sarah replied. "We're giving it freely. The same way we've given fold space technology to every species that wanted it." For the first time in eons, the ancient being felt something it had almost forgotten. Hope. "But old fears die hard. Your offer is generous," the architect said carefully. "But how can we trust a species that has proven so destructive to order?" Torres smiled. "The same way we're trusting you not to activate that protocol while we're standing here." The war hung in balance, suspended between destruction and possibility. The choice belonged to beings who had controlled galaxies for millions of years. They had to decide whether to trust the young species that had shattered their ancient order. The ancient architect stood motionless for what felt like hours. Around them, the massive construct hummed with barely contained energy. The final protocol waited for activation, ready to collapse the entire galaxy into darkness. Sarah Chen watched the alien being's face, looking for any sign of what it was thinking. After millions of years of control, could they really choose to trust humanity? "Your offer is impossible to verify," the architect said finally. "How do we know your technology will work for us?" Sarah reached into her equipment pack and pulled out a small device. "This is a fold space generator. The same technology that let us bypass your barriers. Watch." She activated the device. Energy flowed from it in patterns that the architect's sensors immediately recognized. Clean power drawn directly from the fabric of space-time itself. No fuel needed, no resources consumed. Just pure energy pulled from the universe's own structure. The architect's form flickered with amazement. "This is how?" "By working with the universe instead of fighting it," Marcus Torres explained. "Your barriers try to force reality to follow artificial rules. Our technology finds the natural patterns that already exist and uses them." The architect reached toward the device with sensors that could analyze matter at the atomic level. What it found defied everything it had believed about energy generation. "Impossible," it whispered. "We searched for such technology for millennia. Our greatest minds worked on this problem." Sarah smiled sadly. "Maybe that was the problem. You were looking for ways to control and harvest. We were looking for ways to cooperate and share." Around the galaxy, the war continued to rage. Human ships and their alien allies fought desperate battles against reality-warping architect vessels. Barriers continued to compress, crushing civilizations that had existed for thousands of years. But in the ancient construct, a different kind of battle was being fought. "Even if your technology works," the architect said slowly, "how can we trust your species? You have brought chaos to our ordered galaxy. You have convinced others to rebel against stability." Torres felt anger rise in his chest, but he forced it down. Getting angry wouldn't save the galaxy. "Look around," he said instead. "Really look. What kind of stability requires crushing entire civilizations? What kind of order demands that species live in fear?" The architect gestured, and holographic displays showed the current state of the galaxy. Systems in chaos as barriers closed. Species fighting for survival as their living space disappeared. The careful order of millennia collapsing into panic and desperation. "See what your rebellion has brought," it said accusingly. But Sarah was looking at different parts of the display. "Marcus, look at these readings." She pointed to systems where the barriers had been completely destroyed, where human and alien ships worked together to evacuate threatened populations. where species that had never met before were sharing resources and technology. There's no chaos there, she observed. No war, no destruction. They're cooperating. The architect focused its sensors on those systems and fell silent. The readings showed something it had never seen before in any galaxy. Species working together without being forced to. Civilizations sharing resources instead of fighting over them. Impossible, it said again, but with less certainty. Torres pressed their advantage. You've been so focused on preventing conflict that you never gave anyone a chance to prove they could choose cooperation. You created artificial scarcity, and then blamed species for fighting over scraps. Deep in the construct's computer systems, ancient calculations began running. The architect was modeling what the galaxy might look like without the barriers. Its predictions had always shown chaos and destruction within centuries, but now, with the data from the liberated systems, the calculations were showing something different. The cooperation you show is temporary, the architect argued. When resources become scarce again, your species will fight. They always do. Sarah pulled up her own calculations on a portable display. Not if resources aren't scarce. Look at the energy output from just one fold space generator. Now imagine millions of them, freely shared across the galaxy. Energy scarcity becomes impossible. The numbers were undeniable. The fold space technology could provide more power than entire star systems produced. If it was freely shared, no civilization would ever need to fight over energy again. But the architect had one more argument. Material resources. Habitable worlds. Even with unlimited energy, there are still limits. Marcus laughed, surprising the ancient being. Have you looked at your own galaxy lately? We've been exploring beyond the barriers for months. There are billions of empty systems out there. Worlds just waiting for someone to find them. You've kept entire civilizations trapped in small areas while vast regions of space sit completely empty. The architect's form flickered as it processed this information. Its species had been so focused on controlling their small prison that they had forgotten about the rest of the galaxy. Beyond the barriers lay infinite room for expansion, but expansion leads to conflict, it insisted. Though its voice lacked conviction, it doesn't have to. Sarah replied gently. Not if species know there's room for everyone. Not if they're working together instead of being forced to compete. Around them, the construct systems continued to charge the final protocol. The architect had to make a choice soon. Either trust humanity's offer or destroy everything and start over. Your proposal has merit, it admitted finally. But the risk? If we are wrong, if cooperation fails, entire civilizations will be destroyed. The responsibility is too great. Torres understood the fear in those words. The architects weren't evil. They were terrified. They had seen their own civilization destroy itself through uncontrolled expansion. They had spent millions of years trying to prevent the same fate for others. The responsibility is great, he agreed, but it's not yours alone anymore. We're offering to share it. All of us, every species in the galaxy, working together to make sure nobody else suffers what your people suffered. The architect looked at the small device Sarah still held. Clean energy, freely given. No strings attached, no payment demanded. Just the gift of unlimited power offered to dying aliens by the young species they had tried to imprison. We have controlled this galaxy for 10 million years, it said quietly. We have prevented countless wars, stopped endless conflicts. If we release that control, then maybe for the first time in 10 million years, species can choose to be better instead of being forced to be smaller. Sarah finished. The architect made its decision. The final protocol shut down. Throughout the galaxy, the veil barriers flickered and began to fade. Energy walls that had confined civilizations for eons dissolved like morning mist. But the architect's choice went beyond just turning off the barriers. It began broadcasting the locations of every hidden control station, every secret architect base, every piece of technology that had kept the galaxy imprisoned. We are tired, the ancient being said as the barriers died across 1,000 star systems. We have carried this burden for too long. Perhaps it is time to trust the young species to find their own way. The liberation was visible from every inhabited world in the galaxy. The artificial auroras that had marked the boundaries of their prisons faded away. For the first time in recorded history, the stars were truly free. On Nexus Prime, Supreme Hierarch Veltar watched the barriers around the Council's capital world disappear. His species had never seen the naked stars before. The sight was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. Emergency broadcasts filled the galaxy as species tried to understand what was happening. The careful order that had defined their existence for millennia was gone. The rules that had governed their lives had vanished. But instead of chaos, something remarkable happened. Human ships appeared in system after system, but not as conquerors. They came as teachers, sharing fold space technology freely with anyone who wanted it. They brought star maps showing the vast empty regions beyond the old barriers. They offered partnership in exploring the infinite galaxy that had been hidden from them. The species of the galaxy faced a choice. They could cling to the old ways, fighting over the limited resources they had always known. Or they could accept humanity's offer and join the greatest exploration in galactic history. One by one, they chose exploration. The Zephyrian Empire was the first to officially ally with humanity. Their ships, now equipped with fold space drives, began mapping regions that had been forbidden for millennia. They found worlds that could support billions of beings, resources that made their old scarcity seem like a bad dream. Other species followed. The careful political structures of the old galaxy collapsed, but instead of war they were replaced by loose alliances of explorers. Species that had never met before worked together to map new systems, to share discoveries, to build something greater than any of them could achieve alone. The Galactic Council dissolved within months, but not through violence. The council members simply found better things to do than govern. Why manage scarce resources when you could discover infinite ones? In the ancient architect construct, the last members of that dying race watched the transformation with wonder. The fold space generators that humanity had given them provided more energy than their barriers had ever harvested.